Good evening, you're watching The Focus of the Week. Our topic today is one of the most discussed ones in Georgia, domestic violence against women. Our guest is a lawyer, human rights defender, executive director of the union Sapari, Baya Pataraya. Good evening, Baya. Please present your organization and directions of its activities. And also, please tell us if you're cooperating with foreign organizations of women's human rights protection.
So I work at Union Sapari. Sapari is a human rights organization mainly focusing on women's rights.
Yes.
One of our major direction is working on domestic violence.
Yes.
We're doing advocacy work, also we're providing services for the victims of domestic violence. We also work on to raise political participation of women in political life. And also we're working on discrimination issues regarding sex and gender. We cooperate with UN organizations, for example, and other international organizations. We have partners together with our partners. We are implementing a project which is funded by European Union. And we hope that our cooperation will be more intense with other organizations as well.
Okay, and how would you evaluate this rally performance held on 21st of October? Did you participate in this performance? And what was the aim of this rally? And what do you think, in your opinion, what results did it achieve, this rally performance?
I attended that performance. I think it's important to have frequently these kind of events. It might be some kind of activities, meetings, performances, whatever, just at least to raise awareness among population regarding problem of femicide and domestic violence, and also somehow to draw attention of the government to this problem. There were many, more than 20 casualties of severe crimes of domestic violence. So I think that this is a social problem, and civil society at large, public, and all the relevant stakeholders should be heavily involved in discussing this problem and finding solutions to it.
Okay. Is there any law regulating domestic violence in Georgian legislation, and what is progressive in this law, and what changes do you think it needs, if it needs, of course, some changes?
The first law on domestic violence was adopted in 2006 in Georgia, and we started working on this problem. And in 2012, domestic violence was criminalized under the Criminal Code of Georgia. So at the first glance, you can say that we have legislative frame for domestic violence, but the major problem is not legislation as such, because even recently Parliament has adopted changes to the law to make it more effective. But our major problem and a major challenge is enforcement of the law. We have a serious problem with enforcement of the law, especially taking into account the work of law enforcement bodies in Georgia.
Many victims are avoiding filing a claim in law enforcement organizations against their family member abusers. And that's a big problem. And what do you think should be done, except of rallies, to raise the awareness in the society in this direction?
Well, it is true that many victims of domestic violence refrain themselves to apply to the police or some other state organs to seek help and assistance from them. And it has many bases, and one of them is the lack of trust in law enforcement authorities. I think this is a problem of the state itself. Whenever a victim has applied and called to the hotline or called to the police for help, not in every case they receive appropriate reaction from police, and in many cases they face inadequate actions from the police. The trainings of policemen should continue, because a lot of policemen themselves believe that domestic violence is a problem which should be solved within the family, without further involvement of state organs.
What about the economical crisis in general in the country and financial problems in families? What do you think, what is the weight it has and role it has in the problematic of these domestic violence issues?
Well, we know that in Georgia the social and economic problems are quite severe. A lot of people live in poverty.
Yeah.
There is a high rank of unemployment. And all this wide spectrum of problems negatively affect also family problems. But I would say that the major problem causing domestic violence is existing gender inequality in society. Georgian society is a patriarchal society, where unfortunately men are more valued than women, and men and women do not have equal opportunities, and despite the fact that in law there is equality which is written on the paper, but in real life we see inequality in every sphere of life, starting from real estate issues and inheritance issues, ending with very low political participation of women in politics.
You mentioned these patriarchal attitudes and in general patriarchal family stereotypes, and church also. You know, we hear sometimes from feminist organizations, movements, these complaints against church and patriarchal stereotypes. What do these complaints consider actually? What are they about? And what are the positive approaches that the church may initiate in this direction?
Orthodox Church in Georgia is a very serious player, even in politics. They have highest ranking as an institution, and a lot of people really believe what the priest or clergy say and do. So when we hear the discussion of family problems within the religious institutions, mostly it still upholds the inequality between the family. It still poses men as a heads of the family, and it still underlies the role of the woman as mothers, caregivers, and still persons who should be obedient to their husbands and their families. And in the situation where women are, in more than 90%, are victims of domestic violence, and they're not the perpetrators themselves, but rather perpetrators are men, I think that church could play an important role in the solving of this problem, because a lot of people really pay a lot of attention to what church does and what church says, and unfortunately we're not hearing from them very active statements regarding domestic violence. Rather, they remain silent on this issue, or if they ever talk about families, they underline this different roles of men and women, saying that women should be obedient, and it also implies that women should do everything to maintain the family, even if there is a violence, domestic violence within the family. So they of course could change their attitude and focus on men, and somehow to ask them or like engage them in proactive ways of stopping violence, and somehow to support the victims of domestic violence.
And finally, what would you suggest to a woman who has just been abused? How should she continue her life, and what are the concrete actions she should take?
First of all, these women should understand that it's not their fault what's happening to them. It's not a shame. It happens frequently, and it does not necessarily relate to the victim's behavior and conduct. They should know that there are a lot of women who suffer from domestic violence, not only in Georgia but all over the world. So this is a very widespread problem, and they have to seek assistance outside their families, and they have to call to hotlines for domestic violence, which is 2309-903, and they can ask as many questions as they need to those operators of the hotline. Also, if violence is really severe, they have to ask help from police. And also there are quite a number of non-governmental organizations who offer various services free of charge to the victims of domestic violence. They can get legal consultation, medical consultations, psychological consultations from these people, and find out how to solve this problem. So what they have to do is to ask for help from outsiders, from government and from civil society, and assistance is available for them.
Well, thank you very much, and good luck in your future actions. You were watching Focus of the Week. Stay with Newscafe. Thank you.